I mean, May 27th of this year, I had 12 inches of my colon removed.
All right, so let's talk about Brock Lesnar first. This absolute unit had his entire colon taken out because of something called diverticulitis that was basically a bomb waiting to go off inside him.
Todo eso voy a un chequeo médico y me detectan que tenía cáncer.
Then there's Diego Rivas, who found out way too late that stage 4 cancer was eating him alive. These are stories about UFC warriors who had no clue they were fighting deadly diseases while they were busy fighting other people. Let's dive in.
I mean, May 27th of this year, I had 12 inches of my colon removed, and so I don't even know how many months that has gone by, and here I am in a pretty big fight, so. I feel, I don't need any Christmas present. That's my Christmas present, just to be healthy.
Brock Lesnar was built different. Like, seriously different. This guy was a genetic freak who shouldn't have existed in mixed martial arts. He dominated college wrestling like it was child's play. Made millions of people tune in to watch him fake fight in WWE. Then he shows up to real fighting and somehow captures the heavyweight belt in just 4 fights. That timeline shouldn't be possible for someone who didn't grow up doing martial arts. His size was terrifying. His speed made no sense. His wrestling was world class. When everything clicked, he looked completely unstoppable. But here's the crazy part. For basically an entire year, while Brock was absolutely mauling heavyweight fighters and making it look easy, including that legendary performance where he beat Randy Couture for the title, and that absolutely vicious beatdown he gave Frank Mir at UFC 100. Something inside his body was trying to kill him. He had no idea. Diverticulitis is what they call it. Basically, little pockets form in your colon wall, and when they get infected, things go sideways fast. We're talking potentially fatal here. In the worst cases, your intestine can actually develop holes that let waste leak directly into your belly. That creates infections that can kill the strongest person alive in just hours if doctors don't catch it.
Anthony "Rumble" Johnson passed away on November 13th from complications from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Rumble was somebody that a lot of us loved here.
So late 2009 rolls around, and Brock is up in Canada doing what he loves most, which is hunting. That's when this condition decides to flare up big time. The doctors he first saw completely missed what was actually happening. They thought it was something minor. By the time medical professionals figured out the real problem, his intestine had already torn open. Waste was leaking into his abdomen, creating these dangerous pockets of infection. His immune system was getting overwhelmed. Brock dropped about 40 pounds and looked absolutely terrifying in a bad way. His heart almost gave out completely. He described the pain later as feeling like someone shot him in the gut with a shotgun. Even with his insane pain tolerance, he couldn't handle it. This thing came back again in 2011, and doctors had to cut out a full foot of his colon. The disease played a huge role in his losses to Cain Velasquez and Alistair Overeem because both guys knew his midsection was compromised and went right after it. Eventually, this condition forced him to retire completely, robbed fans of years more dominance. Brock still says to this day that diverticulitis was the only thing that truly beat him, not any human opponent.
Anthony "Rumble" Johnson is your favorite fighter's favorite fighter.
Yeah.
I had a lot of respect for him. He memorably made fun of me to everyone all the time because I thought he thought we were peers, but I always looked up to him.
Our next fighter dealt with something that moved incredibly fast. Anthony Johnson had knockout power that made entire weight classes nervous. Rumble could end careers with one punch. The kind of devastating power that turned him into the absolute nightmare of light heavyweight. Nobody wanted to face this man because his fists carried consequences that could change your life in one split second. Throughout his career, Rumble knocked out 17 people, most of them in the first round. Most of them left wondering what truck just hit them. He challenged Daniel Cormier twice for the title and pushed the champion to his absolute limits both times before coming up short. But something started going wrong in 2021 and Rumble couldn't tell anybody what was really happening. He started posting weird messages on social media, asking people to pray for him, mentioned some serious illness, but wouldn't give details. Fans went crazy trying to figure out what was wrong. Other fighters reached out with support, but nobody knew what they were supporting him through. The whole time Rumble stayed quiet about the details, kept training when his body would let him, kept acting strong and confident even though something inside was destroying him and he couldn't stop it.
How much of this is real beef between you two?
But for me, I take it very personally because, Tim Hague just died doing this, It's serious stuff, It's not a game, it's not a joke. I know I'm taking years off my life to do this.
It was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Cancer of the lymphatic system where cells just multiply like crazy, without any control. The disease had been silently attacking him for months. But that wasn't even the worst part. The cancer triggered something called hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. They just call it HLH for short.
Even if a guy gets up and, everybody sees the knockout and everybody goes crazy and screams, but they don't see the guy laying on the floor, they don't see him when he gets up and he has to go home and talk to his wife and, sometimes you're not the same man,
Anthony Johnson died on November 13th, 2022 at just 38 years old. An age where most people are still figuring out their careers and making plans for the next 30 years.
Still, I felt fine. I didn't feel like I was probably the best shape I've ever been at 42. They finally diagnosed me with lymphoblastic lymphoma stage 4 and gave me potentially a year to live.
Next, we have a fighter who kept his battle completely private until he passed away. Elias Theodorou was impossible to miss when he walked into any room or stepped into that octagon. That flowing hair that got him nicknamed the main event, that magnetic personality that just drew people to him like he had some kind of superpower. The Spartan became the face of Canadian MMA after winning the Ultimate Fighter Nations back in 2014. Fought 8 times in the UFC, climbed to 13th in the middleweight rankings. Made history by becoming the first pro athlete in North America to get approved for medical cannabis use instead of addictive painkillers. Behind that smile that could light up any room and that positive energy that just radiated from him in every interview he ever did, Elias was fighting something that the public knew nothing about. Something growing inside him without mercy or warning. January 2022 arrives, and he just secured another win in the cage. Then doctors hit him with news that would have destroyed most people completely. Stage 4 colorectal cancer that had already spread to his liver. This thing was moving through his body with the same determination he brought to fights. Treatment options were extremely limited. The cancer had been growing silently for who knows how long. Even while he was competing at the highest level, even while he was training and winning fights. No warning signs that he could recognize. No symptoms that seemed alarming. Just a routine checkup that revealed something absolutely devastating, hiding in his seemingly healthy body. September 11th, 2022. Surrounded by the family he chose to share his secret with. Elias Theodorou passed away peacefully at just 34 years old. The MMA world was absolutely shocked when the news broke. Almost nobody knew he was even sick, let alone fighting for his life for months. His family said he stayed eternally and infectiously optimistic even in his final days when he knew the end was coming.
Después de mi pelea, y yo justamente tenía que operarme mi rodilla. Producto de eso voy a un chequeo médico y me detectan que tenía cáncer. Fue una noticia que me llevó de extremo a extremo.
Then there's the fighter who had zero complications until sudden hospitalization revealed his deadly condition. Kevin Ferguson, known to the world as Kimbo Slice, was already a certified legend before he ever signed a professional contract. Those backyard fights in Miami turned him into one of the first viral internet stars ever, a street fighting phenomenon whose raw power and intimidating presence captivated millions of people who had never watched combat sports before. When he transitioned to professional MMA, he brought that massive fan base with him, became one of the most recognizable figures in combat sports history, despite having limited technical skills compared to lifelong martial artists. Kimbo's professional career was a wild ride of incredible highs and controversial lows. Memorable knockouts that sent crowds into absolute frenzies. controversial losses that sparked endless debates, reality TV appearances that made him even more famous. Eventually, a comeback in Bellator where he beat legends like Ken Shamrock in front of huge audiences, but throughout all those public victories and defeats, something was quietly going terribly wrong inside his body. Something that no pre-fight medical exam ever detected. Something Kimbo had no idea was slowly killing him. He had managed high blood pressure for years with medication, but that wasn't unusual for a man his size and intensity. Pre-fight physicals never showed anything doctors thought was life-threatening or concerning. He passed all his medical, kept competing professionally, had absolutely no clue that his heart was gradually failing. The organ keeping him alive was slowly losing its ability to function properly. Early June 2016, Kimbo gets rushed to a Florida hospital complaining of severe chest pain that wouldn't stop and breathing problems that made every moment feel like a fight for survival. Durs delivered a diagnosis that shocked everyone who heard it. Congestive heart failure plus a mass on his liver that made treatment even more complicated. His organs were shutting down one after another. They put him straight into intensive care and got him on the list for a heart transplant. The only thing that might save his life, but there just wasn't enough time. The damage was too severe and too advanced by the time doctors understood what they were dealing with. June 6, 2016, Kevin "Kimbo" Slice Ferguson passed away at just 42 years old.
When he applied to fight, the UFC took an interest.
Called up one number, led them to another number, led them to another number. They got on the phone that night and started calling this person, that person.
Now, let's talk about Tim Hague. This Canadian heavyweight embodied everything the warrior spirit represents. A former elementary school teacher who found his calling in the brutal world of combat sports. The thrashing machine put together a solid UFC career with wins and losses against legitimate competition, kept fighting across different promotions long after his UFC run ended, always brought everything he had to every fight. Never took a contest off, never mailed in a performance. But Tim's career also included something that would prove devastating in ways nobody understood at the time. Knockout losses. 8 of them throughout his MMA career, with 5 coming in his final 9 fights alone. Every single one of those knockouts was significant trauma to his brain. Damage building up fight after fight after fight, building towards something catastrophic that no medical exam could detect or predict back then.
When did you start having problems that you started noticing, a lapse of memory or whatever your case was?
It happens so gradually, you don't even really know. People had to point it out to me. Yeah, we just said that a couple minutes ago. It's sneaky.
June 16th, 2017. Tim steps into a boxing ring in Edmonton to face Adam Braidwood, former CFL football player who switched to combat sports. Tim got dropped multiple times during the short fight before getting stopped via knockout in the second round. Right after the stoppage, Tim walked to his corner, under his own power. Seemed fine, despite all the punishment he absorbed. Then, without any warning, he collapsed. Brain surgery couldn't save him. June 18th, 2017. Tim Hague was removed from life support. He was only 34 years old, but the story doesn't end there. The most important part was still coming. The autopsy after his death revealed something Tim never knew, something that might have changed everything if it had been discovered while he was alive. He had been suffering from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, early-stage CTE that had been developing silently from years of accumulated head trauma throughout his fighting career. He stepped into that boxing ring and fought his final fight with a brain that was already damaged, already compromised, already way more vulnerable to catastrophic injury than anyone realized, and he had no idea whatsoever. Tim's death sparked a provincial investigation that examined every aspect of what led to his passing. That investigation resulted in 14 specific recommendations for combat sports safety improvements in Canada, including mandatory brain scans after knockouts and much longer mandatory suspension periods following any knockout loss. Next up is the UFC fighter who battled stage 4 cancer. Mike "Quick" Swick earned that nickname through lightning-fast finishes during his decorated UFC career that started with Ultimate Fighter Season 1, the reality show that launched MMA into intimate American consciousness. A genuine pioneer who helped build the sport into what it is today, Mike later founded AKA Thailand in Phuket, created one of the world's top destinations for serious fighters looking to improve their skills. After retiring from competition, he seemed to transition smoothly from professional fighter to successful businessman and popular podcast host. In 2021, Mike noticed something weird he couldn't explain: swollen lymph nodes on his neck that showed up literally the day after getting his COVID vaccine. He wrote them off as a normal, expected side effect of the shot. Swollen lymph nodes are well-documented responses to many vaccines as your immune system kicks into gear. Initial medical tests came back completely clear, nothing alarming or concerning. So Mike kept living his extremely active lifestyle, training martial arts, free diving to crazy depths, skydiving for the adrenaline rush, completely unaware that cancer was spreading through his body every single day for over 7 months, more than half a year. Stage 4 lymphoblastic lymphoma silently and aggressively advanced through Mike's system while he felt completely healthy and kept pushing his body to its limits. When doctors finally discovered what was really happening inside him, their outlook was grim. They estimated Mike had roughly 1 year to live without extremely aggressive treatment that might not even work. The man who had faced trained killers in the octagon without flinching was now facing something far more terrifying and unpredictable: an opponent that couldn't be submitted or knocked out. But Mike Swick refused to accept defeat without the fight of his life. He underwent intensive chemotherapy as his medical team prescribed, while also incorporating unconventional and controversial methods that many doctors would have questioned. Extended water fasts lasting 48 to 72 hours around each treatment session, based on emerging research about starving cancer cells. A strict plant-based organic diet emphasizing foods believed to have anti-cancer properties. An absolutely unwavering positive mindset that refused to accept the possibility of death. The results were nothing short of remarkable. Visible swelling from the cancer disappeared within just 1 week of beginning his combined treatment approach. By March 2023, Mike was able to announce to the world that he was officially cancer-free. Now we come to Diego Rivas. This guy gave the UFC and its global audience one of the most spectacular and replayed knockouts. A flying knee that connected with devastating precision and put experienced veteran Noah Lahat to sleep just 23 seconds into the second round of their featherweight bout. The finish earned performance of the night honors and bonus money while cementing the Chilean fighter nicknamed Pitbull as one of the most exciting rising stars in the entire promotion. At 7-0 professionally, with no losses on his record, Diego seemed absolutely destined for greatness. Looked like a future title contender in the making. But that highlight reel victory that thrilled fans around the world came with an injury that would change Diego's entire life trajectory. A damaged knee from a groin strike that happened during the fight. When Diego went to doctors to address the knee injury so he could get back to training and competition, routine medical exams discovered something far more serious and urgent than a hurt knee. Testicular cancer that had already entered his bloodstream and was spreading through his body at an alarming rate. 24 years old, with his entire career and life stretching ahead of him, full of promise and possibility. Diego was told by doctors that he had somewhere between 2 weeks and 1 month to live without immediate and aggressive medical intervention. The cancer was incredibly aggressive, already spreading beyond where it started. Diego had experienced absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. No warning signs that something was catastrophically wrong inside his body. No indication that he was anything other than a healthy young professional athlete in peak physical condition. Diego underwent emergency surgery as soon as it could be scheduled, followed by an entire month of brutal and exhausting chemotherapy that destroyed his body even as it attacked the cancer. The treatment caused significant weight loss that forced him to eventually drop to a lower weight class, fundamentally changing his competitive approach. There were dark moments when Diego admitted he wanted to give up entirely, when the fight seemed impossible to win, but his family refused to let him surrender. They became his corner team in the most important battle of his life, told him that giving up simply wasn't an option, that they were going to fight this thing together no matter what it took. Diego survived. More than just surviving, he came back stronger in ways that went beyond physical recovery. August 2017. Diego Rivas returned to the UFC octagon forever changed by an opponent that no fighter ever expects to face and no amount of training can prepare you for. Gary Goodridge, known throughout the combat sports world as Big Daddy, was one of the original UFC warriors. A man who stepped into the cage at UFC 8 back in 1996 with nothing but raw, terrifying power and an honorary black belt he'd earned literally the day before the tournament. Gary's path to the octagon was unconventional to say the least. He wasn't a trained martial artist with years of disciplined study behind him. He was an 11-time world arm wrestling champion who had won the Canadian super heavyweight boxing title with almost no formal training whatsoever. When his friends saw the early UFC events on TV, they looked at Gary, all 6'3" and 240 pounds of him, and told him he should give this whole fighting thing a shot. His debut against Paul Herrera became one of the most infamous and frequently replayed moments in UFC history. A crucifix position that trapped his opponent helplessly, followed by a series of devastating elbows that left Herrera twitching unconsciously on the canvas. It was absolutely terrifying. It was undeniably iconic. But all those wars, all those knockouts given and received, all those nights of entertaining fans around the world. They came with a devastating cost that Gary didn't understand until it was far too late to do anything about it. It's like a shark in the water that you can't see. In 2012, at just 46 years old, an age when most people are still in the prime of their professional lives, doctors at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto diagnosed Gary with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, commonly known as CTE. The symptoms had been building for years without Gary understanding what was happening. Slurred speech that made conversations difficult, forgotten conversations that he couldn't recall having just minutes earlier, explosive anger toward ones that seemed to come from nowhere. Gary had blamed his changing personality on age. He blamed it on stress. He blamed it on everything and anything except the hundreds of times his brain had been rattled around inside his skull during fights, during training, during a career built on giving and receiving punishment. Today, Gary lives quietly in Ontario, taking a cocktail of medications every single day just to slow the inevitable decline. Attending therapy sessions multiple times every week to maintain what cognitive function remains. Next on the list had a critical condition that exposed him to a near-death experience. Ben Askren was supposed to be living his absolute best life in retirement. The former Olympic wrestler who represented the United States on the world stage. The former Bellator and One Championship welterweight champion who dominated everyone put in front of him. The UFC fighter who brought elite-level wrestling to every contest. He had stepped away from competition and was focusing on his family, his various business ventures, enjoying the fruits of a successful career in combat sports. Everything seemed perfect. Spring 2023, Ben noticed a small staph infection on his elbow after a training session. Staph infections are incredibly common in wrestling and martial arts gyms, where close contact and shared training surfaces create perfect conditions for bacterial spread. Ben cleaned the infection thoroughly and moved on with his life, thinking nothing more of it. Days later, Ben experienced severe back pain that seemed to come out of nowhere. He attributed it to a muscle spasm, a completely reasonable assumption for someone who had spent decades putting his body through the rigors of elite wrestling and MMA competition. Back spasms were practically a normal part of life for someone with his athletic history. But this wasn't a spasm. The staph bacteria from that tiny, insignificant-looking infection on his elbow had entered his bloodstream and was silently invading his lungs, multiplying and spreading with every passing hour. By the time Ben was hospitalized on May 30th, 2023, the infection had caused necrotizing pneumonia, a horrifying condition where bacteria literally destroys lung tissue, eating it away faster than the body can repair the damage. Antibiotics, even the most powerful ones available to modern medicine, couldn't stop the bacterial assault. Ben's lungs were failing rapidly. He was placed on life support, sedated into a medically induced coma to allow his body to focus all its energy on survival. Connected to machines that kept his blood oxygenated while his destroyed lungs could no longer perform that essential function. In late June, surgeons performed a double lung transplant, a procedure that involved removing Ben's completely destroyed lungs and replacing them with donor organs from someone who had died. It was the only remaining option. It was his only chance at survival. When Ben finally woke up in July, he had no memory whatsoever of the previous week. He had lost over 50 pounds from his normally muscular frame. In his first social media post, after regaining consciousness with the dark sense of humor that had always defined his personality, he noted, "I only died 4 times." Our final fighter on the list suffered from post-surgery complications. Kevin Randleman earned his intimidating nickname, the Monster, through sheer athletic dominance that left opponents and audiences alike in absolute awe. A 2-time NCAA Division I wrestling champion at the prestigious Ohio State University, he brought explosive, almost superhuman power to mixed martial arts that very few competitors in any era could hope to match. His UFC heavyweight championship reign and his absolutely legendary knockout of the feared Croatian striker Mirko Crocop in Pride Fighting Championships cemented his status as one of the most athletically gifted fighters the sport has ever produced. But Kevin's career was repeatedly derailed by health crises that seemed to target him with unusual and cruel frequency, interrupting his momentum at crucial moments and robbing fans of what might have been. In the mid-2000s, doctors discovered a severe fungal infection in Kevin's lungs, an infection that had been growing and spreading without his knowledge for an extended and unknown period of time. The infection required surgery to address, but it returned afterward, forcing additional surgical procedures and lengthy layoffs from competition that disrupted his career at what should have been its peak. Then, in 2007 came an even more terrifying battle that brought Kevin closer to death than any opponent ever had. A staph infection that began as something seemingly minor under his arm spread aggressively into his bloodstream, causing his liver and kidneys to begin shutting down simultaneously. Kevin fell into a coma, critically ill for weeks, while surgeons desperately worked to save his life, removing portions of his pectoral and latissimus muscles to combat the spreading bacterial invasion. The wounds left behind were absolutely horrific. Graphic images from that time period showed gaping holes in his body that looked like he had been shot multiple times at close range. Kevin survived against all odds. He actually returned to professional fighting, but he later reflected publicly that he had waited far too long to seek medical help, enduring pain that should have sent him to the hospital immediately, fighting through symptoms that his warrior's mentality told him to ignore. That mentality, the same one that made him a champion, nearly killed him. On February 11, 2016, while traveling on a business trip in San Diego, Kevin Randleman fell suddenly and seriously ill with pneumonia. The infection spread rapidly and led to heart failure before doctors could intervene effectively. At just 44 years old, the Monster was gone forever. He was posthumously inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, recognized as one of the true pioneers who built the sport of mixed martial arts into what it has become today. If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.